Is the idea of sending British troops to Ukraine anything other than a good way of making sure we end up at war with Russia? Ali Miraj.
Well, I do think that we need to be very clear about what the task of those troops is going to be, and if indeed...
To keep the peace, presumably.
Well, if there is a peace to keep. And frankly, if you look back at why Putin made this incursion into Ukraine, I mean, there are lots of reasons. Yes, he wants territory. One of the other reasons was that he gave very explicitly back to 2008 to the Munich Security Conference was, I don't want NATO on my doorstep. Now, if we're living in a world where Trump has just invaded Venezuela because he doesn't want any foreign powers in the Western Hemisphere, and you think back to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, I was making these same arguments almost 4 years ago when this thing happened, and I was called a Putin apologist. I mean, maybe people are now starting to wake up into the real world, and when you have great powers bumping up against each other, it is not a sensible thing. And before someone tells me that NATO is a defensive alliance, I will cite three things to you. Serbia, Kosovo, and Libya as well. So it's purely a defensive.
Well, hang
alliance.
on a minute. I mean, each of those, you can argue that was a defensive.
Yeah, but if you're looking for, fine, you could, because it's saving lives and there was ethnic cleansing going on. I understand, right? I'm not saying that it shouldn't have happened. All I'm saying is, if you're sitting as Putin, as a dictator, which he is, and he wants to acquire land, he would argue that it's not defensive. Now, what does it mean for our troops?
But he's wrong.
It may be wrong. What does it mean for our troops? I think, honestly, if Britain and France are going to be putting troops there, the question I would have is this. Where are the Spanish? Where are the Italians? Where are the Irish? Why is it only us putting our soldiers in harm's way, potentially to be attacked? What for?
Can I address what you said there about Putin's reason being he doesn't want NATO on his doorstep? If he keeps a long swathe of the east, on the other side of it is potentially NATO on his doorstep. If he takes over the whole of Ukraine, on the other side of it is definitely NATO on his doorstep. I think that's completely disingenuous from Putin.
Well, it might be, but I mean, look.
I mean, he brought NATO to his doorstep, what he did.
Well, I think respectfully, I would disagree, because NATO brought themselves to his doorstep by dangling the carrot of NATO membership to Ukraine and EU membership for years, and a bit like dating a girl and never asking her to marry you. That's exactly what happened.
But Ali, shouldn't Ukraine have a right to determine its own future? It's not up to Vladimir Putin.
No, it shouldn't. For the same reason that Venezuela doesn't have a right to determine its own future.
Well, it does have a right.
Well, the thing is, you can, but then you have to live in a world where you're dealing with serious, real-world issues where great powers should not be bumped up against. So yes.
So in your world, Ali, Poland shouldn't have been allowed to join NATO. The Baltic states shouldn't have been allowed to join NATO.
People can do whatever they want. In my view, defensive so-called alliances like NATO.
The Soviets didn't want Norway to join NATO.
Indeed.
And it was allowed to because Churchill and Attlee, and then Truman said, no, they will be allowed to join NATO. So in your world, they shouldn't have been allowed to.
People can do anything they want. And if there is a situation where Russia has incurred into Ukraine, people shouldn't be surprised that that's happened. And they shouldn't then quake when they're not prepared to actually take them on and kick a tanker on the coast of the North Sea.
Let's bring Rachel in.
Well, I'm afraid, to me, that sounds like classic victim blaming. This time last year, I was heading out to, February was the third anniversary. In 2023, it's about to be the fourth anniversary of a war that's gone on as long as the First World War. Western powers, if they really mean it, they should have given Ukraine the means to finish the job. I mean, if that was within the realm of possibility.
But they haven't, Rachel,
but they haven't. And I think putting these boots on the ground, signing bits of paper in Paris in front of placards that says Coalition of the Willing, it's incredibly performative and it's high risk. I would much prefer to have seen the West, including NATO and the US, helped Zelensky force Putin out of the east of Ukraine.
Sheila, Ali's right, isn't he, when he says that it's no point just Britain and France forming this peacekeeping force. Where are all the other European countries?
Yeah, I agree.
We talk a lot about your Irish roots.
Don't blame me and my people.
Where is the Republic of Ireland in this? It has neutrality. And yet it makes pronouncements on Gaza, and it spends nothing on defence and expects us, the British, to protect them.
Well, I can't speak for the whole Irish population or the government, but I imagine that the government of the day, any government of the day recently, would point you to Irish peacekeeping forces in, for example, Lebanon. They would argue that they do.
But why are all these countries not stepping forward here?
I would agree. Yeah, why not? I don't know why not, and they should be.
But let's be honest. I mean, look, irrespective of whether Ireland contributed or not, clearly it would not make the difference. I mean, what Ali's completely right about is two things. The plan that we saw put forward this week by Starmer and Macron or whatever, I mean, it's fanciful stuff. I mean, it's fanciful stuff for two reasons. One, that it's
NATO's
certainly true
gone.
to say that Putin, although I would think he had a completely jaundiced view of history, but nonetheless, given that Putin, in his own mind at least, believes that one of the reasons he's fighting this war is not just for territory. In fact, it's not primarily for territory. Actually, what it's really about, because he believes the quote root cause of the war is NATO encroachment. Now, I think that that's a complete sort of effrontery to the principles of self-determination. But given that he thinks that, why would he agree to have NATO forces literally in Ukraine
He's not
when
going
he
to
has
agree.
been exactly? So the entire idea, the premise of what Starmer and Macron have put forward, is fanciful. And then the second thing, very briefly, is that even if you assume that for some reason Putin acceded to it, clearly the sheer numbers of troops that would be required would require an increase of defence spending on our part, on the French's part, so rapidly, so quickly as to make the entire thing.
Right, Ali, you've been slightly outnumbered on this, so final word to you.
Look, I think where Lewis and the rest can agree on this particular point, what's just been outlined by Lewis there. Just look at the troop numbers. 71,000 troops that we've got, 212,000 that the French have got. Russians, they've lost a lot in Ukraine. I don't know how many of them got now, but probably still 1 million. I mean, let's get serious about this. We should be having
a war economy. And
we should be having a conversation where we actually say we're going to, as a UK, going to play hardball. If we're going to be massively increasing our troop numbers and our defence spending, we should be extracting a better deal from the EU, actually, right? Because we're not going to be taken for a ride by the EU. If you want our nuclear capability, you want our troops to be put in harm's way for you, we're going to extract more economic concessions from the EU. It's time to play hardball.
OK, Marita says there's a huge debate in Ireland at the moment about their neutrality. Zero coverage in the UK. Well, on this programme, there's been quite a bit of coverage of that, it has to be said. Right, our fun